In a small, quiet town where life moved at its own pace, there lived a man who had always been the rock of his family. This man wasn't extraordinary by any means. He was just an ordinary guy trying to make ends meet. He worked hard every day, doing whatever job came his way. But lately, things hadn't been kind to him. Life had thrown one challenge after another, and he found himself standing on the edge of despair. His wife, the love of his life, had fallen seriously ill. It started with a persistent cough that wouldn't go away, followed by days when she could barely get out of bed. The doctors ran tests and finally gave her a diagnosis, something rare and complicated. They said treatment was possible, but it came with a price tag so high it felt like a punch to the gut. Every appointment, every pill, every test drained their savings faster than they could replenish them. The man sold everything he could think of to keep up with the mounting bills. First, it was the tools he used for odd jobs around the neighborhood. Then, it was the furniture in their tiny home. Even their old car, which had been more rust than metal, was sold off. But no matter how much he scraped together, it never seemed enough. Each night as he lay awake next to his sleeping wife, he wrestled with guilt and fear. What if he couldn't save her? What if all his efforts were in vain? One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky orange and pink, he stepped outside onto their creaky wooden porch. The air was cool, and the world around him was unusually silent. Sitting on the steps, he stared at the stars twinkling far above. They looked so distant, yet somehow comforting. In that moment, something inside him shifted. He clenched his fists tightly and whispered to himself, "I won't give up. I'll do whatever it takes." But what exactly could he do? His skills were limited and most of the jobs available paid peanuts. He'd already taken up mowing lawns, cleaning gutters, and delivering groceries, but none of those brought in enough money to cover even half of what they needed. One afternoon, while walking through the bustling city square, he noticed a group of well-dressed men sitting outside a cafe. Their polished shoes gleamed under the sunlight, catching his eye. An idea sparked in his mind, an idea so simple it almost made him laugh. Why not try shining shoes? People here clearly cared about appearances, judging by their shiny footwear. If he offered affordable shoe shines, maybe he could earn some extra cash. It wasn't glamorous, but it didn't have to be. All it needed to do was help him scrape together enough to pay for his wife's treatment. That night, he rummaged through their belongings and found some old rags and borrowed a couple of brushes from a neighbor. The next morning, armed with shoe polish and determination, he set up a makeshift stand near the business district. At first, it was awkward. He didn't know how to approach people or convince them to sit down for a shine. Some walked past without giving him a second glance, while others politely declined. But he refused to let rejection break him. Instead, he focused on perfecting his technique. He learned how to apply just the right amount of polish, how to buff until the leather gleamed, and how to handle different types of shoes with care. Slowly, customers began trickling in. Most tipped generously, moved by his sincerity and effort. Despite the progress, doubts lingered in his mind. Was this really going to be enough? Could shining shoes truly make a difference in the face of such overwhelming challenges? Yet, each time he thought about giving up, he remembered the promise he made to himself under the starlit sky, and so he kept going. One shine at a time, holding on to hope that brighter days lay ahead. The days turned into weeks, and the man continued to polish shoes under the scorching sun and occasional drizzle. His makeshift stand, a rickety wooden stool and a small box filled with polish, brushes, and rags, became his second home. Each morning, he woke up before dawn, prepared his tools, and walked to the same spot near the business district. It wasn't glamorous work, but it gave him a sense of purpose. Every shine brought him one step closer to saving his wife. At first, people barely noticed him. Some walked past without even glancing in his direction, while others offered polite smiles but declined his services. He didn't blame them. It was hard to trust someone who looked like they were barely scraping by themselves, but the man didn't let rejection discourage him. Instead, he used it as fuel to improve. He started paying attention to how other shoe shiners worked, their techniques, their interactions with customers, and the way they carried themselves. Slowly, he began to refine his own approach. One thing he realized early on was that people liked being treated with respect. So, instead of just waiting silently for customers, he started greeting everyone who passed by. "Good morning, sir. Your shoes could use a little shine today," he'd say with a warm smile. Sometimes they'd stop, intrigued by his friendly demeanor. Other times they'd shake their head and move on, but he never let that dampen his spirits. He figured that even if only one person stopped each hour, it was still worth it. As the weeks went by, his confidence grew. He learned how to handle different types of leather, from smooth calfskin to rugged suede. He discovered tricks to remove stubborn scuffs and bring dull shoes back to life. His hands, already rough from years of manual labor, became even more calloused, but he didn't mind. They were proof of his hard work, and he wore them like badges of honor. Despite his growing skill, money remained tight. Most of his earnings went straight toward his wife's medical bills, leaving little for anything else. Some nights, after a long day of shining shoes, he'd return home exhausted, only to find her lying in bed, pale and weak. She tried her best to stay positive, always telling him, "You're doing amazing. Don't lose hope." Her words lifted his spirits, but deep down he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't doing enough. The bills kept piling up, and no matter how many shoes he polished, it felt like he was running on a treadmill, getting nowhere fast. Then came the rainy days, literally and figuratively. When it rained, business dried up almost completely. People hurried through the streets, clutching umbrellas and avoiding puddles with no time to spare for a shoe shine. On those days, the man sat under a borrowed umbrella, watching the water drip onto the pavement. He'd think about packing up and going home, but something always stopped him. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was the fear of letting his wife down. Whatever it was, he stayed put, hoping against hope that someone might need his services. One particularly dreary afternoon, when the rain showed no signs of stopping, a man approached him, dressed in an expensive suit and carrying a briefcase. He looked out of place among the hurried crowd. The man hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Do you have room for one more customer?" Surprised but grateful, the shoe shiner nodded and gestured toward the stool. As the stranger sat down, he struck up a conversation. "Rough weather for business, huh?" he said casually. "It sure is," the shoe shiner replied, focusing on the task at hand. "But I can't afford to take a day off." The stranger raised an eyebrow. "Afford? What do you mean?" For a moment, the shoe shiner debated whether to share his story. He didn't want pity, but there was something about the stranger's tone that made him feel comfortable. So he told him everything: the illness, the bills, the sacrifices. The stranger listened intently, nodding occasionally, but saying nothing. When the shine was done, the stranger handed over a generous tip. Then, leaning forward slightly, he said, "Sometimes success isn't just about what you're doing. It's about how others see you. You've got heart, but you need to show people why they should choose you over anyone else." The words lingered in the shoe shiner's mind long after the stranger had left. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he replayed the conversation over and over again. What did the stranger mean? How could he change the way people saw him? Was it really possible to turn this humble shoe-shining gig into something bigger? The next morning, he decided to take the advice to heart. He knew he couldn't compete with the fancier stands nearby, but he could focus on what made him unique: his dedication and sincerity. He started paying more attention to his appearance, making sure his clothes were clean and presentable. He invested part of his earnings in better tools and materials, ensuring every shine was flawless. He also began engaging customers in conversations, asking about their day or sharing lighthearted jokes. These small changes made a big difference. Slowly but surely, word spread about the shoe shiner, who not only delivered excellent service but also treated every customer like family. More affluent individuals started seeking him out, tipping generously after their shines. Some even recommended him to their colleagues, bringing new faces to his stand. For the first time in months, the shoe shiner felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he was onto something. But he knew this was just the beginning. Saving his wife required more than just polishing shoes. It required building a future where she wouldn't have to worry about tomorrow. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, he felt ready to face whatever challenges came his way. As the shoeshiner's reputation grew, so did his confidence. Each morning he woke up with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that his work was making a difference, not just for his wife, but for himself too. The compliments from customers were like rays of sunlight breaking through a stormy sky. "You've got magic hands," one businessman said after seeing his worn-out loafers transformed into gleaming masterpieces. Another remarked, "I've never seen my shoes look this good." These small victories kept him going, even on days when things felt overwhelming. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were still moments when doubt crept in, whispering cruel thoughts into his ear. Was he really cut out for this? Could polishing shoes ever amount to something meaningful? The bills didn't stop coming, and no matter how many shoes he shined, the weight of his wife's medical expenses loomed large over him. Some nights, as he counted the day's earnings, he wondered if he'd made any real progress at all. The numbers never seemed big enough, and the fear of failure gnawed at him. One afternoon, while taking a short break between customers, he noticed a young boy wandering nearby. The child couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old, dressed in clothes that were clearly too big for him. He carried an old shoe brush in one hand and looked hesitant, almost scared, as he glanced around. Curious, the shoe shiner waved him over. "Hey there, little guy," he said gently. "What are you doing here?" The boy shuffled his feet nervously before replying, I thought maybe I could shine shoes too. My mom's sick and we need money." His words hit the shoe shiner like a punch to the gut. It was as if he was looking at a younger version of himself, a desperate soul trying to hold his family together. Without hesitation, he invited the boy to sit beside him. "Tell you what," he said with a warm smile. "Why don't you stick around for a bit? I'll teach you a few tricks and maybe we can share some customers today." The boy's eyes lit up with gratitude, and together, they spent the rest of the afternoon working side by side. Watching the kid learn quickly and put his heart into every shine reminded the shoe shiner of why he had started in the first place. Helping someone else gave him a strange kind of strength, a reminder that even in his struggles he could still make a difference. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the shoe shiner walked the boy home. Along the way, they talked about life, the boy's dreams of becoming a doctor someday and the shoe shiner's hope of saving his wife. When they finally reached the boy's house, the shoe shiner handed him half of the day's tips. "Take care of your mom," he said firmly. "And remember, no matter how hard things get, keep pushing forward." The encounter stayed with him long after he returned home. It made him realize that his journey wasn't just about survival. It was about creating ripples of kindness wherever he went. Every person he helped, every life he touched, added meaning to his own struggle. That night, as he lay in bed next to his sleeping wife, he whispered softly, "We're going to make it, I promise." The next few weeks brought both challenges and triumphs. Business picked up steadily, thanks to his growing list of loyal customers. Some of them came not just for the shine, but also for the conversations they shared. They spoke about their families, their jobs, and sometimes their own battles with hardship. The shoe shiner listened intently, offering words of encouragement whenever he could. In return, they often left extra tips or recommended him to friends, spreading his name further across the city. One regular customer, a middle-aged woman who worked as a manager at a nearby office, became particularly fond of him. She admired his dedication and often brought snacks for him during her lunch breaks. One day, she pulled him aside and said, "You know, you deserve better than sitting out here in the heat all day. Have you ever thought about opening your own shop?" Her question caught him off guard. A shop? The idea sounded impossible. Too expensive, too risky. But the seed had been planted and it began to grow in his mind. What if he could turn his humble stand into something bigger, something stable and sustainable? For the first time in months, he allowed himself to dream beyond the immediate struggle. He started researching quietly, asking questions whenever he could. One of his frequent clients, a businessman who always tipped generously, offered advice when he learned about the shoe shiner's aspirations. "If you want to build something lasting," the man said, "you need to think bigger. Invest in quality tools, create a brand people trust, and find a location where foot traffic is high. You've already won their hearts. Now give them a reason to come back." Encouraged by these words, the shoe shiner decided to take the first step toward expanding his operation. With the help of a few trusted customers, he rented a tiny storefront in the heart of the business district. It wasn't much, a cramped space with peeling paint and creaky floors, but it was a start. He cleaned it up himself, painting the walls a fresh white and setting up a counter where customers could drop off their shoes. He hung a sign above the door that read, "Shine and Care, where your shoes get the love they deserve." On the day of the grand opening, nerves buzzed in his chest like bees in a hive. Would anyone show up? Had he made a mistake investing what little savings he had into this venture? But as the morning wore on, familiar faces began trickling in. His loyal customers greeted him warmly, congratulating him on the new shop. Word spread quickly, and soon, the narrow space was filled with chatter and laughter. Watching people walk in and out of his store, the shoe shiner felt a surge of pride. This wasn't just a business, it was proof that hard work and determination could move mountains. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful. Saving his wife was still his top priority, but now he had something else driving him, the belief that he could build a future worth fighting for. The shoe shiner's new shop quickly became a hub of activity. Every day, people from all walks of life poured in, not just to get their shoes polished, but also to share stories and catch up on gossip. The tiny space buzzed with energy, laughter echoed off the walls, and the scent of leather polish mingled with the aroma of coffee brought by customers who lingered longer than they intended. For the shoe shiner, it was more than just a business. It was a community he had built from the ground up. But running a shop came with its own set of challenges. Rent was due every month, supplies needed restocking, and there were days when the line of customers outside seemed endless. Despite this, the shoe shiner refused to cut corners. He believed that quality and care were what set him apart, and he wasn't about to compromise on either. Each pair of shoes that left his shop gleamed as if it had been touched by magic, earning him rave reviews and repeat customers. People began referring to him as the man with the golden hands, a nickname he wore humbly. One afternoon, while polishing a particularly stubborn scuff on a pair of expensive Oxfords, the shoe shiner noticed someone standing at the doorway. It was the same sharply dressed stranger who had once tipped him generously and offered advice during those early, uncertain days. The man smiled warmly as he stepped inside, glancing around the bustling shop before settling his gaze on the shoe shiner. Well, the stranger said, his voice carrying a hint of admiration. "Look at you now. This place has come a long way." The shoe shiner stood up, brushing stray bits of polish from his apron. "I owe a lot of it to you," he admitted sincerely. "That day you stopped by my stand, it changed everything for me." The stranger chuckled softly. "All I did was point you in the right direction. You're the one who put in the hard work." Their conversation continued as the shoe shiner gestured for the man to take a seat. While working on his shoes, the shoe shiner shared how far he'd come since their first meeting. The late nights spent learning new techniques, the sacrifices he'd made to keep the shop afloat, and the joy of seeing his wife's health improve, thanks to the treatments he could finally afford. "You've done incredible work," the stranger said thoughtfully. "But tell me, what's next? Do you plan to stop here?" The question caught the shoe shiner off guard. Until now, his focus had been solely on keeping the shop running and ensuring his wife's recovery. He hadn't allowed himself to think beyond survival. But as he considered the stranger's words, an idea began to form, a spark of ambition flickering to life within him. "What if I told you," the stranger continued, leaning forward slightly, "that your potential goes far beyond this little shop? You've already proven you can build something from nothing. Why not aim higher?" "Higher?" The shoeshiner frowned, unsure of what the man meant. His shop was thriving, yes, but expanding further felt like stepping into uncharted territory. Still, the stranger's confidence was contagious and curiosity got the better of him. "Explain," the shoeshiner said simply, setting down his brush. The stranger leaned back in his chair, crossing one leg over the other. "Think about it. Right now, you're catering to individuals who walk through your door. But what if you took your skills and turned them into something bigger? A chain of shops, perhaps, or even a brand known across cities. Imagine having employees trained under your methods, reaching more people, and creating opportunities for others like yourself." The shoeshiner sat silently, letting the words sink in. A chain of shops? Employees? It sounded like a dream too big to be real, yet deep down he couldn't deny the excitement bubbling in his chest. Could he really do it? Could he turn his humble beginnings into something much greater? Before he could respond, the stranger added, "Of course, growth takes resources. Time, money, connections. But don't let that scare you. Start small. Train someone reliable to help you here, then open another location nearby. Take it step by step, and soon, you'll see results." By the time the stranger left, the shoeshiner's mind was racing. That night, as he closed up shop and walked home, he replayed the conversation over and over again. The idea of expansion terrified him. It meant taking risks, possibly failing, but it also ignited a fire he hadn't felt in years. For so long, he'd been focused on surviving day by day. Now, for the first time, he dared to imagine a future where he didn't just scrape by. He thrived. The next morning, he arrived at the shop earlier than usual. As sunlight streamed through the windows, he grabbed a notebook and began jotting down ideas. What would it take to open another shop? Who could he trust to manage it? How could he ensure the same level of quality and service that had earned him such loyal customers? His thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of a familiar face. The young boy he'd met months ago, the one who wanted to shine shoes to support his sick mother. The shoeshiner smiled warmly as the boy entered, clutching a worn backpack. "I thought maybe I could help out again," the boy said shyly. "If you still need someone." Something clicked in the shoeshiner's mind. Here was someone eager to learn, someone whose circumstances mirrored his own. Why not give the boy a chance? Not only could it ease some of the workload, but it could also teach the child valuable skills, and perhaps inspire him to dream bigger, just as the shoeshiner had been inspired. "All right," the shoeshiner said, nodding firmly. "Let's get started." Over the following weeks, the shoeshiner trained the boy patiently, teaching him everything from basic polishing techniques to interacting with customers. The boy proved to be a quick learner, and before long, he was handling simple tasks independently. Seeing the pride in the boy's eyes reminded the shoeshiner of his own journey, the struggles, the lessons, and the triumphs. It reinforced his belief that helping others rise could create a ripple effect, touching lives far beyond his own. With the boy's assistance, the shoeshiner found himself with more time to focus on planning for the future. He saved diligently, reinvesting profits back into the business. He reached out to trusted customers, asking for advice on finding affordable locations for a second shop. Slowly but surely, the pieces began falling into place. One evening, as he locked up the shop and prepared to head home, he paused to look around. The once empty walls were now adorned with thank you notes from grateful customers, photos of smiling faces, and even a few awards he'd received for his exceptional service. It struck him then how far he'd come, not just financially, but emotionally and mentally. From a desperate man sitting on a porch under the stars to a proud owner of a thriving business, he had transformed in ways he never thought possible. And yet, he knew this was only the beginning. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its twists and turns, but he was ready. Armed with determination, gratitude, and a vision for the future, he stepped out into the cool night air, feeling hopeful for what lay ahead. The shoeshiner's decision to expand his business wasn't made lightly. It was a leap of faith, one that required him to dig deep into his reserves of courage and determination. Every night after closing the shop and walking home, he'd lie, awake thinking about the risks involved. What if he failed? What if the second shop didn't attract enough customers? The fear of losing everything he had worked so hard to build gnawed at him, but it was outweighed by a quiet, stubborn belief that he could make it work. He started small, as the stranger had advised. Instead of rushing into renting another space or hiring a team, he focused on training the young boy who had become an integral part of his daily routine. The boy, eager to prove himself, soaked up every lesson like a sponge. From mastering the art of polishing different types of leather to handling customer complaints with grace, the boy grew more confident with each passing day. Watching him blossom gave the shoe shiner a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that building a business wasn't just about profits, it was about creating opportunities for others. With the boy taking on more responsibilities at the shop, the shoe shiner finally had time to scout for a location for his second outlet. He spent weekends wandering through nearby neighborhoods, jotting down notes about foot traffic, competition, and rent prices. Some areas seemed promising, while others felt like dead ends. But he refused to settle. If he was going to expand, he wanted it to be done right. One afternoon, while exploring a bustling market street, he stumbled upon a vacant storefront tucked between a bakery and a tailor's shop. The place was dusty and in need of repairs, but its location was perfect, right in the heart of a busy area frequented by office workers and shoppers. His heart raced as he imagined the possibilities. This could be it, the spot where his dream of expansion would take root. After negotiating a fair rent with the landlord, he rolled up his sleeves and got to work. With the help of a few trusted friends, including some of his regular customers, who offered their skills for free, he transformed the run-down space into a cozy, inviting shop. Fresh paint brightened the walls, new shelves displayed bottles of polish and brushes neatly arranged, and a sign above the door read, "Shine and Care, bringing your shoes back to life." When the renovations were complete, even the shoe shiner himself couldn't believe how far he'd come. Opening day arrived with a mix of excitement and nerves. The shoe shiner woke up early, dressed in his cleanest clothes, and headed to the new shop. As he unlocked the door and stepped inside, he took a moment to breathe it all in. The smell of fresh paint, the gleam of polished surfaces, and the hum of anticipation in the air. By mid-morning, the first customers began trickling in. Word had spread quickly thanks to flyers handed out at the original shop, and soon the tiny space was buzzing with activity. What surprised the shoe shiner most was how warmly people embraced the new location. Many of them weren't just there for the service, they were curious about the man behind the brand. They asked questions about his journey, marveled at his dedication, and shared stories of their own struggles and triumphs. In those moments, the shoe shiner realized that his business was more than just a place to shine shoes. It was a connection point, a reminder that everyone has battles to fight and dreams to chase. As the weeks went by, the second shop proved to be a success. Customers kept coming back, bringing friends and family with them. The revenue from both locations allowed the shoe shiner to hire additional staff, including a young woman who had recently lost her job due to company layoffs. Like the boy, she approached her work with enthusiasm and gratitude, and the shoe shiner took pride in knowing he was making a difference in their lives. But the real turning point came when a local newspaper featured his story. A journalist, intrigued by the shoe shiner's rise from humble beginnings to owning 2 thriving businesses, wrote an article highlighting his perseverance and generosity. The piece struck a chord with readers, many of whom visited the shops not just for services but to meet the man who had inspired them. Overnight, Shine and Care became more than a brand. It became a symbol of hope and resilience. The increased visibility brought unexpected opportunities. Business owners from neighboring towns reached out, asking if he'd consider franchising his concept. Investors expressed interest in backing his expansion plans. At first, the shoe shiner was overwhelmed by the attention. He had always been a simple man, content with working quietly behind the scenes. But as he weighed his options, he remembered the stranger's advice: think bigger. Taking a deep breath, he decided to embrace the momentum. He hired a consultant to help him navigate the complexities of scaling his business. Together, they developed a plan to open more shops across the region, each one maintaining the same commitment to quality and customer care that had defined the original location. To ensure consistency, the shoe shiner personally trained every employee, instilling in them the values that had guided him since day one: honesty, hard work, and compassion. Despite the growing demands of managing multiple locations, the shoe shiner never lost sight of what truly mattered: his wife's health. Thanks to the steady income from the shops, her treatments continued without interruption. Her condition improved steadily, and though she still needed care, the darkest days seemed to be behind them. On quiet evenings, they'd sit together on the porch, watching the stars and talking about the future. For the first time in years, they dared to dream again, not just of survival, but of happiness. The boy who had once helped him polish shoes now managed the original shop, having grown into a capable and confident young man. The shoe shiner often visited to check in, marveling at how much he had matured. One evening, as they sat side by side sharing a meal, the boy looked at him and said, "You changed my life, you know that?" The shoe shiner smiled, patting him on the shoulder. "No, son, you changed yours. I just gave you a push." It was true. While the shoe shiner had provided guidance and opportunity, it was the boy's determination that had carried him forward. And in seeing the boy succeed, the shoe shiner found a deeper satisfaction than any amount of money could buy. Helping someone else rise reminded him of why he had started this journey in the first place: to create a better tomorrow, not just for himself but for those around him. As the months passed, the shoe shiner's chain of shops continued to grow, earning accolades and loyal patrons along the way. Yet amidst the success, he remained grounded. He knew that no matter how big his business became, it would always be rooted in the simple act of shining shoes, an act born out of desperation, nurtured by kindness, and sustained by hope. And so, with gratitude in his heart and a vision for the future, he pressed on, determined to keep building something meaningful. Because for the shoe shiner, success wasn't measured by wealth or fame. It was measured by the lives he touched and the legacy he left behind.